Okay, let's unpack this. Burger King, the home of the Whopper. You know, a fast food giant.
Right.
Now, picture their flagship burger, but covered in mold.
Uh-huh.
Like fuzzy green mold, the kind of thing you'd expect to find way in the back of the fridge.
Definitely not something you'd expect in an ad campaign.
Exactly. Not plastered all over marketing. Sounds like a total career-ending PR disaster, right?
You'd think so. But nope, wrong.
Because back in 2020, this became the absolute core of a marketing campaign that didn't just go viral. It was, well, let's try and figure out exactly what it was.
Yeah, what's fascinating right from the start is just the sheer audacity of it.
Totally.
We've got material here detailing how Burger King's Moldy Whopper campaign took this seemingly disastrous image, a burger decomposing naturally.
Which is pretty gross, let's be honest.
It is. And they somehow flipped it into this marketing triumph. So our mission today is to really dig into how that happened.
Right, like what were the underlying consumer trends that even made this possible?
Exactly. And what does it tell us about, effective advertising today? It's constantly evolving.
Absolutely. And that central visual, it was truly unforgettable, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. That 45-second time-lapse video.
Showing a Whopper
No.
just changing over 34 days, it started looking like, well, a Whopper.
That flame-grilled icon, yeah.
And ended up looking like something you really wouldn't want to touch.
Something best left undisturbed, for sure. And the core message they kept hammering home through all of this.
The beauty of no artificial preservatives.
Such a counterintuitive tagline for that visual.
It really is. But if we connect this to the results, the success is kind of hard to ignore.
Definitely. We're looking at reports of a 4% increase in sales?
Yeah, and a huge wave of media attention, just massive.
So that raises the big question for us, the one we need to explore. How on earth did Burger King manage to make a moldy sandwich seem appealing?
Or at least make the idea behind it appealing. How did it become a selling point?
Right, that's the genius, or maybe the madness we need to dissect.
Okay, so let's start with the why. Why mold? It just feels so completely backward.
It does. But the information we have points to a pretty significant shift in what consumers were actually looking for back in 2020.
Okay.
The data shows this growing interest in what people often call clean eating.
Ah, right. Fewer artificial ingredients, more natural stuff.
Exactly. Reports were suggesting that a really large majority, something like 82% of consumers, were actively looking for food without artificial ingredients.
Wow, 82%, that's huge.
It is. And Burger King clearly saw this trend. They knew they needed to tap into it.
Okay, but just saying we're natural or no artificial preservatives, I mean, the fast food world, that's incredibly noisy, isn't it?
Oh, completely. It feels like that would just get lost. So many brands were starting to make similar claims or trying to.
So they needed something disruptive, something that would really make people stop and look.
Precisely. And this is where I think they cleverly tackled a really long-standing issue.
Or just,
The sort of underlying skepticism, the lack of trust, maybe, that a lot of consumers have about the fast food industry in general.
Okay, yeah. We've all heard those urban legends, right? Those stories about fast food burgers that just never seem to decompose.
Exactly. The ones that look pretty much the same after months, maybe even years sitting out.
It's a really pervasive idea, whether it's, completely true across the board or not. People believe it.
They do. So the Moldy Whopper campaign just walked right up and confronted that perception head on.
How so?
By visually showing the natural process of decomposition, they were basically saying, hey, look closely. Our burger molds.
And it molds because it doesn't have all those artificial preservatives that would stop it from doing that.
You got it. That was the core message, as the material emphasizes. Our burgers mold because they're the real deal.
It's such a bold move, taking what anyone would see as a huge negative mold and framing it as irrefutable proof of a positive.
Proof of quality, proof of naturalness. It's quite the marketing judo move.
Okay, so that's the why. Now let's get into the how. How did this visually, challenging idea actually manage to go viral and hit those success metrics?
Right, the execution. It seems like several key elements were really crucial.
First off, that visual itself, it was meant to be a real gut punch, wasn't it?
Definitely. This wasn't your typical slick, slow motion bite shot food commercial.
No glamour shots here?
Not at all. That 45-second time lapse, it had this almost cinematic feel, but also slightly unsettling.
And the music choice, that slowed down kind of haunting cover of what a difference a day makes.
Yeah, that added to the whole mood. What's really interesting is how deliberately different it was.
How so?
Well, competitors usually show this hyper-realistic, almost too perfect version of their food, right?
Yeah, the idealized burger.
Burger King went for this stark, unvarnished realism, even though that realism included, well,
Visible decay.
exactly, visible mold. But it aimed for authenticity, a kind of transparency, even if it wasn't traditionally pretty.
Okay, so the core visual was strong, but it wasn't just one video, right? It didn't just appear out of nowhere.
No, no. The information we have highlights a really comprehensive, multi-platform blitz. This campaign was everywhere.
Like where?
TV spots, YouTube, Instagram, X, what was then Twitter, of course,
Okay, the usual digital spaces.
but also print ads in major publications like Time, the New York Times,
Wow, print too. Okay.
and billboards, big moldy billboards. And crucially, the hashtag Moldy Whopper hashtag, that became the rallying cry online.
Ah, the hashtag. Essential for tracking the conversation.
Absolutely critical.
Mm.
And the social media reaction that followed was, well, it was a firestorm.
Good or bad, or both.
Definitely both. The reactions really span the entire spectrum. You had people genuinely applauding the boldness, the transparency.
And then you had...
Understandably, people expressing outright disgust. You know, this is gross. Why would you show this?
Right. But the key thing was...
People were talking about it. They were sharing it, reacting to it,
Mhm.
arguing about it.
Mhm.
That was the goal.
So even the negative reactions fueled the fire.
In a way, yes. Influencers jumped in.
Yeah.
Even people who were fans of competitors got drawn into the discussion about it.
It really plugged into that meme culture, didn't it? Something so visually striking and just weird
Yeah,
that people couldn't help but share it.
exactly. Whether they loved it or hated it, they shared it. And that generated this massive wave of organic reach way beyond paid media.
And the timing, that seems like it played a role too, maybe unintentionally.
It seems so. The campaign launched in February 2020.
Which was? Oh, right, just before everything shut down globally.
Precisely, just before the pandemic lockdowns really hit. And that unexpected timing seems to have actually amplified the campaign's impact.
How so?
Because suddenly, everyone was stuck at home spending way more time online
Scrolling.
and actively looking for content that was engaging, distracting, maybe even a bit shocking. The Moldy Whopper landed right in that environment.
Okay, so a massively risky move, no question. Showing your product covered in mold is playing with some serious marketing fire.
Absolutely. High risk, high reward potential.
So how did Burger King try to, manage that risk, mitigate the potential disaster?
Transparency seems to have been the main strategy. Job number one.
Okay.
The campaign consistently and very clearly communicated that the mold wasn't the point. The reason for the mold was the point.
Meaning the lack of artificial preservative.
Exactly. They hammered that message.
Mhm.
The mold is direct evidence of the absence of artificial stuff. They weren't hiding the mold. They were framing it as proof.
So lean into the controversy, but control the narrative.
That seems to be it. And their established brand image probably helped buffer them a bit too.
How do you mean?
Well, Burger King has often positioned itself as, a bit edgier, a bit more rebellious than, say, McDonald's.
Yeah, they do have that challenger brand vibe sometimes, like that Whopper detour campaign where they sent people to McDonald's.
Right. They've done cheeky, bold things before. So this inherent boldness in their brand identity probably made the Moldy Whopper feel maybe less completely out of left field than it might have for another brand.
Okay, so it kind of fit their personality.
Exactly. And that type of campaign likely resonated particularly well with younger groups.
Like Gen Z and millennials.
Uh-huh. Demographics that often appreciate brands willing to take risks, be unconventional, maybe even poke fun at themselves or the industry.
Makes sense. But surely not everyone loved it. There must have been pushback.
Oh, absolutely. There were definitely negative reactions. And some people raised valid points, asking about, other ingredients in the Whopper.
Right, like, okay, no artificial preservatives, but what about sodium or fat or other things? Accusations of hypocrisy.
Yeah, that kind of thing came up.
Yeah.
How did Burger King handle that criticism?
From what we see, they generally responded with a mix of, humor,
Okay.
acknowledging the feedback where it made sense, but mostly just doubling down on their core message.
Reiterating the commitment to removing artificial preservatives from more items.
Right. By engaging directly, even with the negative stuff, they managed to kind of keep the conversation anchored to their main point.
Didn't let the criticism completely hijack the narrative.
Yeah. This whole strategy, it really uses the psychology of shock marketing, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a classic, if extreme, example.
Deliberately creating something unexpected, maybe even a bit repulsive,
to cut through the clutter. In today's advertising world, it's just so noisy. It's incredibly hard to get noticed.
So shock can work.
Shock marketing, when it's done strategically, can be very effective at grabbing that initial attention. The Moldy Whopper definitely triggered a visceral reaction.
Disgust for a lot of people.
For many, yes. But that initial shock, undeniably attention-grabbing. You couldn't just scroll past it.
And then, like we said, came that crucial flip.
The narrative flip, yeah. Turning that negative gut reaction, the mold, into a perceived positive.
Proof of natural ingredients, commitment to quality, all that.
Exactly. We've seen similar kinds of tactics, maybe less visually extreme, but similar principles.
Like what?
Well, think about Nike's ad with Colin Kaepernick. Hugely controversial, sparked massive debate.
Right, tons of attention, positive and negative.
Or even a brand like Liquid Death Water, with its really aggressive, unconventional heavy metal branding for water.
Okay, yeah. Using something unexpected or polarizing to stand out.
These brands leverage those elements to cut through the noise, just like Burger King did, albeit in a very different way.
So did all this shock and mold actually work? Did it translate into real results? The numbers often tell the story.
They often do. And in this case, they seem pretty positive for Burger King.
What did they report?
Reportedly, a 4% increase in sales right after the campaign launched.
Okay, 4% might not sound huge, but in the fast food industry, that's pretty significant, right?
It can be, yeah. Especially for a mature brand. And then there's the earned media aspect.
To buzz.
Massive buzz. Over 1 billion with a B impressions on social media.
Wow.
Major news outlets all over the world covered it. Adweek, the New York Times, CNN. That's millions in free publicity.
And it won awards too, didn't it, within the ad industry?
It swept them. Numerous prestigious awards, including a Grand Prix at the Cannes Lions Festival, which is like the Oscars for advertising.
So the industry recognized the creativity and effectiveness, even if some consumers were grossed out.
Definitely. Beyond just sales and awards, did the Moldy Whopper have a broader cultural impact? Did it actually change how people think about fast food?
That's harder to measure, obviously.
For sure. But it certainly challenged that long-held idea that fast food has to look perfect and unchanging, almost artificial.
Maybe made some people think a bit more about what's in their food.
It likely prompted some of that, yeah. Thinking more critically about ingredients, about processing.
And didn't McDonald's make some changes around that time too?
Interestingly, yes. Shortly after this campaign, McDonald's relatively quietly announced plans to reduce artificial preservatives in some of their own menu items.
Correlation or causation?
Hard to say definitively, but the timing is certainly suggestive. It shows the conversation was shifting.
Okay, so behind every big campaign, there's usually a team or teams. Who are the agencies that actually pulled this off?
It was a big collaboration, actually. 3 main agencies were involved.
Who were they?
NGO Stockholm, David Miami, and Publicis.
Okay, what did each one do?
Well, NGO Stockholm is generally credited with coming up with the initial, very bold, creative spark, the core idea.
The moldy vision.
You could say that. Then David Miami was crucial in adapting it for the U.S. market and really driving that all-important social media strategy.
Getting the hashtag trending, managing the conversation.
Exactly. And Publicis handled the overall global coordination, making sure it rolled out effectively in different markets.
It sounds like it probably wasn't an easy sell internally at Burger King, though. I imagine showing a moldy burger wasn't instantly approved.
No. Reports suggest there was some initial hesitation, some internal skepticism, which is understandable.
Yeah, you can see why executives might pause on that one.
Absolutely. Presenting your main product looking like it's rotting. It's a huge perceived risk.
But the agencies pushed for it.
Apparently, yes. They were reportedly very confident in the approach, and they had consumer data backing them up.
The data showing people wanted transparency, more natural food.
Right. That data gave them the conviction to argue for this bold, risky idea. And ultimately, that conviction paid off.
So thinking about other brands, maybe listening to this, what are the big marketing lessons we can pull from this? From the Moldy Whopper?
There are several really important takeaways, I think.
Like what?
First, maybe the most obvious, is that sometimes you need boldness. A willingness to take calculated risks can really make you stand out.
Don't just play it safe all the time.
Not if you want to break through.
Yeah.
Second, you absolutely have to know your target audience, deeply understand what resonates with them, what they value.
Okay, what else?
Third, think about turning perceived weaknesses or maybe just unconventional aspects of your product or brand into potential strengths, like mold becoming proof of naturalness.
Finding the positive in the negative.
Sort of, yeah. Fourth, never underestimate the power of social media to amplify something unexpected and shareable. You need that hook.
Make it talkable.
Exactly. And finally, maybe most importantly, any campaign, no matter how edgy or attention-grabbing it is, still needs to fundamentally align with your brand's overall identity and values. It can't feel totally random.
It has to make sense for that brand, like the edginess fitting Burger King.
Precisely.
So what's the lasting legacy then? Is the Moldy Whopper just going to be this weird footnote in advertising history?
I think it's actually more significant than that. It's really become a kind of benchmark
A benchmark for what?
for authentic marketing. Even if it's unconventional, even uncomfortable authentic marketing. It showed you could be brutally honest visually.
And it influenced other campaigns.
You can see echoes of it, I think.
Right.
Maybe not directly copying, but in campaigns that lean into transparency, a rower feel. Think about Wendy's constantly hammering their fresh, never frozen message.
Yeah, that focus on a key quality attribute.
Or a brand like Patagonia. They're very direct, sometimes challenging storytelling about sustainability and environmental impact. It's about telling a truth, even if it's not always pretty.
It's still kind of amazing, though, this entire deep dive, all this discussion, it really revolves around the image of a decaying burger.
It really does.
Uh-huh.
It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it, how a single provocative visual
Combined with a really smart strategy.
and brave execution,
Yeah.
how that can completely disrupt the traditional ways of doing marketing.
Okay, so to really wrap this up then, the Moldy Whopper campaign. It wasn't some accident. It wasn't a mistake.
No, it was deliberate.
Calculated, a deliberately conceived, yes, admittedly risky, but ultimately pretty brilliant strategy.
It seems so.
Yeah.
By daring to show their product decomposing naturally.
They sent a message about authenticity, about no artificial preservatives, in a way that just another slick ad probably couldn't have.
Exactly. It cut through because it was so unexpected, so visceral.
So this leaves us with a really interesting question for you listening. How might other brands look at their own products, their services, find those maybe seemingly negative or just unexpected aspects?
The things you usually don't talk about.
Right. And how could they creatively transform those into a compelling, maybe even trustworthy story for their audience?
That's a fascinating challenge, turning flaws into features almost.
And on that slightly moldy note, has this deep dive maybe changed your perception of fast food at all, even just a little bit?
And what does a campaign like this ultimately tell us about the lengths brands might go to today just to get our attention in this crazy fragmented world?
Definitely something to digest.